This guy was as cold and calculated as they come. Maybe we weren't going to get it solved.
It was like the epitome of innocence that had been preyed upon.
This is a case that has no evidence. We didn't have DNA. We didn't have fingerprints.
Step inside the court of law with the new true crime podcast, American Justice.
We realized we have 4 men who answered the same ad for a job on a farm.
My brother Ralph went to interview and he was never seen again.
A podcast that explores impactful crimes and reveals how our justice system works.
You have to consider that there are more possibilities than one.
And sometimes how it doesn't.
We have to find whoever this monster is.
Go in depth into chilling cases and their conclusions in this new true crime series.
You just have a pit in your stomach thinking, how many people are we going to find?
New episodes of American Justice are available every Wednesday, wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 380 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing good, man.
Episode 380 on Unsolved.
Yeah.
We have out right now episode 400 on True Crime All the Time. I don't have the beautiful mind that you do, but I'm pretty sure that's 780 episodes.
Yeah, we should hit 400, by the end of the year on Unsolved? Roughly 20 more weeks?
No.
Come on. We can do it.
That's 5 months. We don't have 5 months left in the year. I just said you had a beautiful mind and you proved me wrong.
We can extend the year.
But speaking of episode 400 on TCAT, it's Albert Fish. And, he's an infamous murderer. His number of confirmed murders is not that high.
No.
But the number that he's thought to have murdered is much higher. But it's the way that he murdered and the things that he did. And, in his own words, he was a rough guy.
Pretty rough.
Let's go ahead and give our Patreon shout outs. We had Jill Knuckles.
Hey, what's going on, Knuckles?
Jacob.
Hey, there's Jacob.
Tracy Anderson Gribble.
Well, thanks, TAG.
Jody Robeson.
What's up? I feel like saying cough syrup, but I know it's not how you say it.
I know it's not. Frankenberry.
Hey, Frankenberry.
Your favorite cereal.
Yeah.
Yelena Solis.
Hey, Yelena.
Kat.
Hey, Kat.
Susan Scully.
What's up, Susan?
Donna Page.
Hey, there's Donna.
Carol Jarrett.
Good old Carol.
Ash Toutant.
What's going on, Ash?
I have no idea how you say that, but I like it, so I'm going to say it that way.
I think it's Toutant.
And last but not least, Catherine Schindel.
There's the Schindel.
And if we go back into the vault, this week we selected Tracy Revoy.
Hey, thanks, Revoy.
Yeah, so we appreciate the new support, the continued support. We had a large PayPal donation from Deanna Handshoe.
Hey, thanks, Deanna.
And we also had a donation from David Rand.
You're awesome. Thank you, David.
Yeah, thanks to everyone. All right, buddy, are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I'm ready.
We're talking about the murder of Patrice Horsley. Patrice Horsley was murdered in late 1993 in Rosedale, Mississippi. 3 decades later, her case remains unsolved. Some believe that the main suspect in the murder was a man connected to a powerful local family. But as is always the case, or a lot of times is the case, it's very possible she was murdered by a lone killer, maybe even a serial killer, just passing through the area. 22-year-old Patrice Horsley, a young mother, disappeared in Rosedale, Mississippi in December 1993, according to her brother's statement to the outlet WREG. However, a key witness said he saw her in January 1994. Patrice was reported missing by her family on January 13th, 1994. that day, her abandoned car was found near Rosedale city limits. According to the police report, there was blood on the hood of her car. Mud, underwear, pants, and one boot were found inside the vehicle. So an abandoned car, Gibbs, that happens a lot, right? You don't know what happened. Somebody ran out of gas, or if they had a flat tire, you could see that pretty easily. I think, when the police respond to a car in a situation like this, blood on the hood, right away, okay, they're going to start to wonder about a few things. Are we talking criminal? Did this person hit some type of animal?
Right.
But then when you find what's in the car, there's mud in the car, underwear, pants, one boot. Those are strange things.
Yeah, I think at that point, your detective senses go off.
Deputies found Patrice's body on January 14th near a Rosedale cemetery. So from the time that she was reported missing to when they found her body, just a day.
Yeah, not too much time had passed.
No. According to Vanity Fair, her body was found in a field next to the Mississippi River levee. Her pants were around her ankles, and the branch of a pecan tree was found in her vagina.
Sickening.
Yeah, I mean, this was a horrible scene. Patrice had been beaten beyond recognition and was identified by the single boot she had on, which matched the boot found in her car. According to the police report, it looked like Patrice tried to run, but someone went around the tree and picked up a limb or big stick and beat her in the head with it. So you said, right? Sickening. This is a really nasty murder scene. And it also seems pretty evident based on the fact that, her pants were down. There was an object found in her vagina. There was some type of sexual assault component. Right. Her exact time of death could not be determined. Her autopsy results indicated she was beaten over the head with a blunt object and strangled. Her skull was caved in, and the autopsy found massive craniocerebral trauma, brain hemorrhaging, and multiple fractures to her facial bones. Her body was also covered in cuts, most likely from trying to escape by running into the barbed wire fence at the cemetery. So, heartbreaking for a family to find out that their loved one has been murdered. But when you get these details, it has to make it even worse somehow.
Well, sure, because now she really suffered.
Yes.
The panic that she must have went through, trying to get away, but then just running into barbed wire.
It's one thing to find out that, someone you love has died. It's never going to be an easy thing to deal with. It could be natural causes. It could be an accident, a car accident. All of that's going to be tough. But what we just described has to be on a completely different level. Patrice's case soon went cold, but the residents of Rosedale had their suspicions. And a lot of people focused their suspicions on a man named Ronnie Estes. Vanity Fair spoke with Patrice's brother, Derek, who said that everybody knew Ronnie hung out with Patrice, and she and her friends liked to hang out and build bonfires next to the cemetery where she was killed. In 2017, Anthony Gibson, the former chief of police of Beulah, the next town over from Rosedale, spoke to writer Adam Gollner from Vanity Fair, who was in the area for a different assignment. Gibson told Gollner that he had been looking into cold cases where two victims in separate incidents were killed with the branch of a pecan tree. That seems very specific. Now, I know there's a lot of pecan trees down that way.
Right. Pretty common.
But to have two different people beat to death with, the branch or limb or whatever of a pecan tree seems like maybe more than a little coincidental.
Did you say pecan or pecan?
I say pecan, but I know a lot of people say pecan or pecan, like Pecan Sandy, the cookie.
Oh, yeah.
I don't like those, but.
Yeah. I don't think it's pecan, but I know a lot of people say pecan.
You just said it wasn't that. I think you can say it a number of different ways. I don't know that there is any one way to say it.
Oh, I think if you ask the right people, they'll tell you there's only one way to say it.
I think it's like envelope or envelope. Both are acceptable.
No, it's envelope.
I say envelope, I think. I don't know.
Put something on the envelope, make it envelope.
You put it in the envelope? So one of the main suspects was Ronnie Estes, who was going to be released from prison soon. Gibson helped get Estes convicted of sexual battery against a 6-year-old girl in 2003. So, I mean, obviously, this conversation is happening many, many years after the murder of Patrice. And even this sexual assault and him going away to prison happened, almost 10 years after the murder. Ronnie's brother, Kerry, was once the mayor of Rosedale. Kerry had Anthony Gibson fired from Rosedale's police force 13 years earlier while Gibson was investigating the homicide. So, I mean, I think you could look at that a couple of ways. Number one, Anthony Gibson has an axe to grind because he got fired, or he was fired because he was looking into these homicides and maybe getting too close.
And they didn't want him to keep looking.
A third Estes brother, Billy Joe, was the chief investigator and deputy sheriff of the Bolivar County Sheriff's Office, meaning he had jurisdiction in Rosedale. He was first hired as an assistant marshal on the Rosedale police force in 1963. So we set it up front, right? One of the main suspects, or one of the people that a lot of individuals look at as a suspect, was part of a pretty prominent family. Okay, well, he had a brother who was the mayor. Another brother was, high up in law enforcement. Billy Joe was known for patrolling Rosedale with an M16 and occasionally a club.
Intimidating?
You got a little bit of the guy from Walking Tall vibe with the club, but okay. Now, when it says patrolling, does he have an M16 in the car, or is he just walking around holding an M16? Because those are, two very different things. According to Vanity Fair, he was a feared man, but also a revered paternal figure. And almost everyone interviewed for the story characterized him as a solid, competent policeman, except when it came to dealing with his youngest brother. So that was pretty interesting, coming from Vanity Fair. People had great things to say about this guy.
Right.
But it sounds like they also said he wasn't impartial when it came to, dealing with his younger brother, Ronnie. A former member of the Bolivar County Sheriff's Department said Billy Joe did what he wanted. Cases that Billy Joe didn't want prosecuted, they didn't get prosecuted.
It's a lot of power.
Well, I'm also getting the vibe of, a small town. How much power does, let's say, a sheriff, a mayor have in a small town? And from my experience, I would say even more. The smaller the town, the easier it is to wield power.
Absolutely.
Billy Joe died on April 2nd, 2005, at the age of 64. Now, in regards to the sexual battery case, Anthony Gibson explained that Ronnie was living with the victim's mother after an alleged domestic violence incident in 2003. She called the police and decided to move out. That was when the victim informed her mother of the repeated sexual abuse. Anthony Gibson got in touch with Ronnie's brother, Kerry, who was a business owner at the time. He asked Kerry to get the mother and daughter's belongings from Ronnie's home. Gibson was hoping that he would pick up the child's toothbrush to see if Ronnie's DNA was on it, because the victim said he forced her to perform oral sex. Kerry brought the toothbrush to Gibson with other personal belongings. A forensic lab found traces of semen on the toothbrush.
Well, that's not going to be good.
No. Obviously, something very horrible went down. Gibson secured a court order to obtain Ronnie Estes' DNA, and the sample matched. Ronnie's trial lasted just one day because his lawyers unexpectedly entered a guilty plea. Ronnie was sentenced to 15 years in prison with 5 years probation. He was scheduled to be released in October 2018. Gibson explained to writer Adam Goldner how Ronnie Estes could potentially be connected to the unsolved murder of Patrice Horsley. Gibson went to high school with Patrice. In January 1994, he saw Patrice at the Double Quick convenience store in Rosedale. She was with Ronnie Estes. When Patrice walked over to Gibson, he could tell that she was hot. He told her she needed to stop and that this wasn't like her. He also warned her about associating with Ronnie, who was 6 years older than her and had already gotten into trouble with the law. Before 2003, he had been convicted of 3 felonies and other crimes. Ronnie said he was first arrested at the age of 20. Gibson told her, per Vanity Fair, "You may not realize who you're hanging with." Patrice answered, "Boy, I know. We're just going to ride around and drink a bit." Patrice and Ronnie purchased a 48-pack of beer, then left the store heading north on Highway 1.
A 48-pack of beer.
That's a lot of beer.
It's like 2 cases.
I don't know what they call that, a suitcase of beer? Or I think they have a special name for that.
Yeah.
I think I remember those when I was in college, vaguely.
Yeah, vaguely.
But soon Gibson heard that Patrice had been murdered and found in a graveyard. Gibson also described the murder of Ethel Webster, another woman from Rosedale, who was found dead in the same area and had been beaten and sexually assaulted in the same manner as Patrice. And I'm thinking, Gibbs, these are the 2 homicides that, we talked about earlier. Same manner in which they were beaten and sexually assaulted. Now, no one knows who committed the murders, and Gibson was careful to point out that Patrice may have been with several other people throughout the night. He didn't specifically accuse Ronnie Estes, especially because there are at least 2 other suspects. And how could he come out and specifically accuse Ronnie Estes? Right. You can't do that in an article like Vanity Fair. You can't even do that on this podcast. But there have been additional accusations against Ronnie Estes over the years. On June 17th, 1987, a Rosedale resident named Carmichael Warren was hit by a car and barely survived. Warren said he was playing pool with Ronnie Estes at a local club. Ronnie was losing, and he was angry. He asked Warren for $10 or $20, and Warren refused to give it to him. They started fighting. Warren claimed that Estes hit him between the legs with a pool stick.
That's not cool.
That is not cool in any situation. Warren left on foot. Then Estes allegedly hit him going 50 to 60 miles per hour and left him for dead. Now, nobody likes to lose at anything.
No.
Me especially. I'm a pretty sore loser. But, to wrap someone in the family jewels with a pool stick and then, run over them doing 60 miles an hour, you got some serious anger issues.
Yeah, you're more than just a sore loser.
Yeah. You got some problems. Warren told Vanity Fair, "I was tore up. My intestines was mashed out my rear end. I went through hip bone replacement, metal plate in my back. I still got to wear a catheter. When I came to, I told them who ran over me. It was Ronnie Estes. My intestines was mashed out my rear end."
That can't be a good thing.
I thought that only happened in pool water filter freak accidents.
Suction filter things?
Yes.
Why do we know that? I don't know.
I don't know, but that was always a myth, right? You remember hearing about that?
Was it a myth?
Oh, it was always something that people talked about.
Yeah.
Don't get your rear end too close to the...
Don't sit on that...
thing at the pool,
yeah.
or it'll suck your
That's
right out your what.
But did you try it though? You
I'm sure I
it,
did at some point. But obviously this guy got jacked up.
Yeah, he did.
There's no 2 ways about that. According to the Sun Herald, the Humphreys County NAACP presented former Rosedale Mayor J.Y. Trice with a petition outlining grievances. One of those grievances was a claim that the sheriff's department failed to take action against Ron Estes after the Carmichael Warren incident. Sheriff H.M. Grimmett said in September 1987 that the office didn't act in the case because of a possible conflict of interest. as Ron Estes' brother was a county deputy. The matter was given to Mississippi Highway Patrol and was still under investigation. So I don't know exactly what happened. But from my way of thinking, if it really was handed over to another investigating office, that probably was a good thing.
For sure.
There was a conflict of interest. Now, did it really happen or did it just get swept under the rug? I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Or was it, hey, we're going to hand this over to you, but I don't want you to do anything with it.
Right. Ronnie Estes was a suspect in the 1988 hit-and-run death of Donald Hughes, a resident of Beulah. Donald Hughes was walking home on Highway 1. After getting into an altercation with Estes, Hughes was run over, backed over, and then run over again.
Wow, man. This is kind of his MO, it sounds like, if it's true.
Well, let's face it. When you have one person that says, okay, this person did that, is there evidence? Is there not evidence? I mean, when it starts to become a pattern, at what point do you have to say, where there's smoke, there's fire?
Right.
Now, you still have to have the evidence.
True. Otherwise, it's just hearsay.
In 2018, Vanity Fair reported that the county sheriff's department has no record of the Carmichael Warren or Donald Hughes incident.
Of course not. So it's like it's never happened.
And when you hear a statement like that, I mean, what does it make you think?
Most likely somebody on the inside helped him out.
And kind of just swept it away.
Yeah.
Made it go away.
Or you have to say both of those victims lied, made up the story about who did it.
Well, I'm assuming they could prove that they had some serious injuries.
Right.
Pretty hard to say it's an accident when you're run over, the person backs up over you.
Right.
And then runs over you again.
Assuming you got some tire marks on you.
Something. In 1996, Ronnie Estes pleaded guilty to 2 counts of aggravated assault after shooting a woman named Jean Washburn in the face. He also shot her husband in the knee. He was sentenced to 5 years with 4 suspended on the condition that he not commit any offenses or own a gun during the probationary period.
All right, we're going to give you 5 years, but if you tell me right now that you won't do it again, we're going to only give you a shorter period of time. One.
We're going to 1 year.
4 of it.
We're going to suspend 4. Now, I don't know all the particulars, but it seems to me as though if you shoot a woman in the face and her husband in the knee, unless it was some kind of strange self-defense scenario, which I think would be odd, involving a husband and wife, 5 years with 4 suspended seems quite lenient.
And how would you get such a deal?
Maybe if you knew some people.
Yeah.
Estes was later charged with aggravated assault for shooting William Michael Fortenberry in the thigh. He claimed that the gun went off accidentally. He was convicted of felonious possession of a firearm. So he wasn't convicted of shooting this guy, just of being a felon in possession of a firearm.
I don't know what I was doing with the gun, and it accidentally went off and shot this son of a bitch over here.
Dude, after you've shot 3 or 4 people, how can you keep claiming accident? I mean, at a certain point, you know, who's going to buy that? Ronnie violated his probation in other ways and did short stints in prison until his 2003 conviction. A court-ordered psychological evaluation noted that he showed underlying antisocial psychopathology.
Really?
I'm not even a trained psychologist, and I could have told you that.
Yeah.
If even half of this stuff is true. I mean, he's running over people, he's shooting people, he's hitting people in the nads with pull stick cues.
Imagine being his neighbor.
I don't want to be anywhere around someone like this because you kind of get the sense of a ticking time bomb. Right? You don't know what's going to set this person off, but you know it's going to happen. You just don't know if it's going to happen to you or somebody else. The Estes brothers were known throughout Bolivar County in the 80s and 90s. Anthony Gibson told Vanity Fair, Ronnie was scary dangerous. He had a shield of protection over him. He could do anything. Nothing would happen. He shot someone in the head in the broad open daylight in front of the courthouse.
Okay. That's confidence.
I'm also getting a real Roadhouse vibe.
Yeah.
Remember the bad guy in Roadhouse? He kind of owned the town.
Exactly.
He could do anything he wanted. He had everybody in his pocket.
Brad.
I think of you more as the guy that worked for him who said, the polar bear fell on me.
No. I don't know where you were going. I knew you were going to say the guy that was a martial arts expert.
Oh, no, the badass guy?
Yeah, I
no,
knew that wasn't going to go there. I thought maybe you were going to go with a super tall guy that drove the truck to sound like kind of like an idiot.
Oh, yeah, he did. He wasn't real smart, was he? You know, we mentioned it earlier. Gibson later became police chief of Beulah. He had no jurisdiction in Rosedale, which does not have a formal police chief. Former Mayor Carrie Estes served in the police chief capacity. So again, it was a really small town atmosphere. He was the mayor. He was the chief of police.
His brother was a county sheriff, so
who also had some jurisdiction in Rosedale.
Yeah.
So they both kind of did. The murder of Patrice Horsley continued to go unsolved. A reporter named David Lush wrote about the Patrice Horsley case for the Boulevard commercial, but the paper never ran the article on his investigation, even though he spoke to a resident who claimed to have witnessed important details about the murder.
Did somebody shut the article down?
Well, your mind has to automatically go there, right? When Lush tried to follow up with his source weeks later, the man was gone. His neighbor said he moved across the country in a hurry.
This kind of sounds like how the mafia works.
Well, it's either, a crazy conspiracy theory or there was a lot of stuff going on in this town that was shady. Lush told Vanity Fair that crimes in the Mississippi Delta go unsolved because of something called the Magnolia Curtain. He started using this phrase after he saw magnolia trees in a cemetery north of Rosedale. Lush explained, those magnolias sweep all the way down to the ground like they're trying to cover everything. There are people that know about some of the unsolved murders, but they aren't going to talk about it to this day.
Cover-ups.
Well, and that part I always think is true. There are people that know about unsolved murders, but are they going to talk about them? I think most of the time not. It's not in their best interest. There's nothing in it for them. There's only the negative. According to Vanity Fair, back in 2018, the only online article that mentioned Patrice Horsley was a 2005 piece from the Clarksdale Press Register written by Larry Liddell. Now, since then, there's been coverage by WREG, but that seems very strange. Even in a small town situation, for hardly no one to cover the murder of this woman.
Pretty sad.
It's sad, but it also makes you think that there were forces at play behind the scenes that maybe led that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, if you were thinking about writing an article about it and you heard that this individual was involved, you probably said, you know what? I'm just going to stay away from it.
The Register reported that in 2001, the local sheriff claimed a tornado hit the courthouse and the reports related to unsolved Rosedale murders were blown out of the building. Larry Liddell told Vanity Fair that there have been 11 unsolved murders in Rosedale in the last 40 years. He said that reporters investigating crimes in the Mississippi Delta are at risk.
You imagine waiting. We got to get rid of these records. But we got to do it in a way that we can't get in trouble. And then all of a sudden, a storm comes through. And you're like, all right, boys, let's go down there. We're going to get rid of these records now. We're going to blame it on the tornado.
This is the perfect cover?
Yeah. It could have just been the fact that a tornado came through and took out those specific files. Could have.
I don't know if he said only those.
But I'm thinking.
Only the unsolved
Yeah.
ones. When asked why so many homicides are unsolved, Liddell answered, somebody did not do a thorough job of investigating. Well, if you want to put the conspiracy hat on, Were people told not to investigate? Were people threatened not to investigate? I mean, here you have a reporter saying reporters investigating were at risk. Well, how much investigating are you going to do as a reporter if you think your life is at risk if you do it? Maybe you find a different story.
Yeah. You know who they needed down here? Remember that movie with Matt Damon and Danny DeVito? He played like an attorney coming right out of...
The Rainmaker?
Yeah, that was in Mississippi, right?
I don't know. A lot of his books were. What about it?
Well, there's this guy in there that knew how to investigate things.
Which character?
The Mickey Rourke guy.
Oh, Mickey Rourke's character.
I don't remember his name, though.
Mickey Rourke's character.
Yeah.
Liddell's article reported that Billy Joe Estes was the chief investigator for the Bolivar County Sheriff's Office for 2 unsolved murders that occurred in June of 1963, as well as the murders of Patrice Horsley, Ethel Webster, and Donnie Hughes. In late October 2005, former Rosedale Police Director Anthony Gibson filed a lawsuit in U.S. District Court, alleging that Rosedale Mayor Carrie Estes retaliated against him because of Gibson's investigations of the unsolved murders. Gibson alleged that Billy Joe prevented proper investigations of all 3 of the murders from the 1990s. In his lawsuit, he said he considered Ronnie Estes a suspect in at least 3 of the murders. So, it's one thing to say something to a paper or to say something to a friend, but he's filing a lawsuit in a district court, no doubt saying, hey, I was fired because I was looking into these murders and I was getting too close to Ronnie Estes. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know, but he's putting it out there.
He's saying it.
According to Liddell's article, the Clarksdale Press Register reported that there is a police report on the Patrice Horsley case, but there is no report available on the other unsolved cases, including the one from the 1960s. In the Patrice Horsley police file, Billy Joe took a statement from one of Patrice's associates asking, "Did you see Ronnie that day?" When Liddell asked Carrie Estes about the 1963 file, he said former Sheriff L.B. Williams took it with him when he left office and was going to write a book about the case, but no book was ever written. The 1963 case involved Sammy Dana and Ricky Cheatham, both from Rosedale. Billy Joe Estes always claimed that he refused to discuss the case because he knew the family didn't want any further investigation done. He considered the case closed as a murder-suicide. He thought it was clear that Ricky Cheatham killed Sammy Dana and then killed himself. Anthony Gibson explained the reasoning behind his lawsuit to Vanity Fair. One evening, he received a call to go to Rosedale's Club Millennium, which was owned by Carrie and Richard Lee Estes, who died in 2013. There had been a surge of violence in the area, so the county sheriff ordered all hangout spots to close by midnight. The Millennium stayed open past curfew. Gibson and other officers issued a citation. Richard Lee Estes told Gibson to get his ass out of there. Richard Lee shouted at him and got up in his face, so Gibson handcuffed him for disorderly conduct. Richard Lee was let off with a warning. But apparently Carrie Estes was furious. Several officers present would testify that Carrie said if he ever became mayor, he would make sure Gibson was fired.
Well, that's a threat.
And if true, it was one that was carried out. The following year, soon after Ronnie Estes' sexual battery conviction, Carrie Estes was made mayor of Rosedale. Things were pretty quiet until Gibson started investigating Mayor Estes on a complaint about underage drinking at Millennium. During this inquiry, a police informant videotaped a shooting outside the club. Gibson was fired days later. He tried to get another job in law enforcement, but was told the city of Rosedale gave him a bad reference.
Imagine that.
He was later awarded $60,000 in damages, which is not a bad chunk of change, but, if you can't work in your line of preferred work, it's not a ton of money.
No.
Around this time, the Cleveland News Leader started researching Billy Joe Estes. Journalists asked Billy Joe about inconsistencies in the Patrice Horsley case and other homicides that happened under his watch. He yelled at them and hung up, and then he died soon after this.
Sounds like maybe it was pretty stressful for him.
Yeah, well, the Cleveland News Leader, fairly big paper.
You're not going to be able to shut them down.
Not like you could a small town paper, no way. Vanity Fair reached out to David Johnson, the former editor of the now defunct News Leader. Johnson said that during their investigation, the county sheriff let him see the Patrice Horsley file. It had very little documentation. One reason was that after the murder, Billy Joe kept much of the evidence from the case in the trunk of his car throughout the summer, which tainted the evidence and destroyed usable DNA.
So was he just not a smart investigator, or was this done on purpose?
Pretty hard not to think that anyone wouldn't know that all of this stuff left in the trunk of a car was going to get hot and it was going to get messed up.
Right.
I don't think you need to be a top-notch trained forensic investigator to know that.
Right. Common sense.
The new lead investigator in the case told Vanity Fair they intentionally tampered with it and destroyed it. Okay, that's a very bold statement. That's not, well, this might have happened or they were careless.
And if that's a true statement, why would they do that? Because they didn't want it to come back on Ronnie?
Family? Yeah. I mean, that's, what else could you think? Ex-DNA Lawrence Mellon told Vanity Fair that he remembered reading about how blood evidence was inadmissible after being stored in the trunk of a squad car in the summer. But he said, that's just what happens in a small town.
Blame it on the small town. It just happens in a small town. We can't help it.
You got to stop blaming everything on John Cougar Mellencamp. During Anthony Gibson's lawsuit, testimony was entered about Gibson's investigation into Ronnie Estes's possible role in unsolved murders. In court, a DA's office investigator named David James testified that in order to make sure the sexual battery case wouldn't slip through the cracks, he had to go above the DA to the state attorney general, or else the case wouldn't have gone anywhere.
Wow, that tells you a lot.
Well, what it tells me is that you have a lot of people, either directly or indirectly involved in this case, saying that they were getting pushback on just about everything. James cited the personal connection between Billy Joe and DA Lawrence Mellon. David James is now a PI. He told Vanity Fair that he was an undercover narcotics agent at the time of Patrice Horsley's murder. The sheriff asked him to look into the case. A week after the murder, he saw that Ronnie had scratches on him. He claimed he fell in a bathtub. DA Lawrence Mellon asked him to join his office after the murder. James claimed that Mellon told him about his connection to Billy Joe Estes. One day in the summer, Billy Joe took Lawrence Mellon onto the Mississippi River to go catfishing. It was the kind of catfishing, Gibbs, where you jump into the water and catch the fish with your bare hands. I think they call it noodling.
Yeah, we've done that before.
Yeah, I've never done that. I've seen it done on TV. I wouldn't mind doing it, but
you'd be good at it.
I prefer to catch them with a rod and reel. Apparently, Mellon was still in the water when it was time to leave. Billy Joe told him that he wasn't going to take him back until they made a deal. According to David James, they were so far out, and if Mellon didn't do exactly what Estes wanted him to do, then he wasn't going to get back in that boat. So Mellon made a promise to Billy Joe and, in effect, his mom that as long as she lived, he would keep Ronnie Estes out of prison. That's exactly what Lawrence Mellon said. He would make sure that Ronnie would never go to prison.
And if true, that's wrong.
James testified to this in court. So again, this wasn't just, him telling this to people he knew. This wasn't just him telling it to a paper. He testified to this in court.
The only thing I never understood is when you hear these stories, right? Like somebody's got you in an awkward position and they're saying, look, I'm going to feed you to the alligators or I'm going to leave you here unless you tell me you're going to do what I want you to do. Well, why wouldn't you say, oh, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, I'll do it. Don't worry. Take care of it. And then when you're not around them anymore, can't you change your mind and take care of it a different way?
Well, yeah, I think you could, but here's my thought. If a person is willing to go to that extreme, would you not have a little hesitation about, well, what else are they willing to do?
True.
And specifically willing to do to me if I go back on my word. Lawrence Mellon left the DA's office in 2009 after 26 years, and he's now retired. Mellon told Vanity Fair that he misses his friend Billy Joe, but doesn't know Ronnie Estes. He said that he worked closely with Billy Joe. Vanity Fair asked if it was possible Billy Joe would have withheld information in cases involving his brother. Mellon said he had no comment and didn't know the answer to that. He was asked if Billy Joe could have protected his brother. He said, I don't know. It'd be difficult. Now that I'm thinking of Billy Joe Estes, he would not have let his brother off. That's why I respected him. He refuted David James's story about his deal with Billy Joe and said he fired James and James filed a suit against him. Mellon was granted qualified immunity. Mellon then said, I'd be very careful if I were you. When asked what he meant by that, he responded, no comment. So he's denying that, all of this stuff happened. He doesn't think that Billy Joe would have protected his brother. But at the end of the interview, he says, you know what? If I were you, I'd be very careful. Why?
Why? Yeah. Of you or of?
No comment. What does that mean?
Or of the Estes family?
I don't know. It's a very ominous statement though, right?
Very.
David James confirmed he was fired, but only after James informed Mellon he was planning to run for sheriff. He stood by what he said in court. Now, I think the one thing that you would definitely have to say about this story, the entire story, is that, there are some people with axes to grind or axes to pick, as you would say. But does that mean they're not telling the truth? That's the part that you have to figure out. A lot of the people that they're talking about are refuting their claims. So, at what point does it become, this person says this, the other person says it didn't happen. Who do you believe?
Where all these people were or still are in positions where integrity means everything, it seems likely that someone's not telling the truth.
The current sheriff's department did allow Vanity Fair to view the Patrice Horsley file, which was apparently not destroyed by a tornado. Chief Investigator Michael Williams said the case was poorly investigated. The file contained no interrogation of Ronnie Estes or interviews with friends and family. The only interview is an audio recording of a Rosedale resident named Ricky Graham, who said he was with Patrice on the day she died. The interviewer was Billy Joe Estes. Graham claimed he saw Patrice smoke at least 6 joints the day she died, but the toxicology report found no marijuana in her system, although she did have crack cocaine in her system. Billy Joe also asked Graham if he saw Ronnie with Patrice. Graham said no, he did not see other suspects with Patrice either. So, we kind of hinted at that earlier, right? Billy Joe Estes doing this one interview and asking someone if they saw Ronnie with Patrice. Well, it turns out that it was this guy, Ricky Graham, and he said no. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean that Ronnie couldn't have done something to her later on when Ricky Graham wasn't around?
It also could mean that Ricky did see Ronnie there, but was intimidated by his brother sitting across from him.
And was told what to say, what not to say. Not saying that's what happened, but it obviously could have. When contacted by Vanity Fair, Graham said that Ronnie Estes was with Patrice on the night she died. When he listened to the interview tape, he said part of it may have been from an interview in an unrelated case. Okay, if that's true, it is a little shrewd, but it's also really, really shady.
Oh, yeah.
You go to someone on the pretense, let's say, that you're asking about another case. You ask the question that you want to ask. But then you stick it in the Patrice Horsley file as though you asked the question about that investigation.
Now you got a good cover for your brother. He was never there.
And it's possible you didn't have to intimidate anyone because they thought they were being asked a question about a completely different case. Other documents in the case file include a semen test that was done 9 months after the homicide. The results of that test were not in the file. The sexual assault kit was also not in the file. The file did include crime scene photos and the full autopsy report. The photos showed bite marks on one of Patrice's breasts, but these weren't mentioned in the autopsy report. The report also said the external genitalia is essentially unremarkable with no cuts or lacerations. This contradicts what Anthony Gibson said, that Patrice was sexually assaulted with the branch of a pecan tree. Current investigators with the Bolivar County Sheriff's Department didn't know why the report contradicted eyewitness accounts and photographic evidence. Gibbs, I don't know what is going on with any of this stuff.
No, I don't either.
None of it seems to match. How can you have crime scene photos showing something that the medical examiner doesn't note in the autopsy? Something so glaring as bite marks on the victim's breast.
Either a lot of people got the information wrong, or the power reached through so many different levels and they made sure that certain things didn't make reports.
Well, let's not forget the fact that somebody said this file blew away along with all the other files in a tornado.
Right.
Obviously, that was not true, but there wasn't much in the file, and what was in there didn't seem to match other evidence that was in there. A former member of the sheriff's department told Vanity Fair that the killer had assaulted Patrice with a stick. Former investigator David James was at the crime scene when the body was found and also confirmed she was assaulted with a tree branch. Current Chief Deputy Sheriff Michael Lamb noted that his team had testimony about Ethel Webster, the woman who was killed near the Patrice Horsley crime scene. They couldn't locate her file. And I think that would have to be very frustrating, right? To take over a department and you want to investigate some cold cases, but you either A, can't find the file, or B, you find the file and there's barely anything in it and nothing in it really seems to make sense.
And you can't really do anything with that.
Well, a lot of years have gone by.
Yeah.
The sheriff's team said they planned on interviewing Ronnie Estes in jail, but months later, Vanity Fair learned that he would no longer be questioned because there just wasn't enough evidence to merit an interview. During his interview process with Vanity Fair, one of Anthony Gibson's family members was shot at but was uninjured. Two men approached his relative and said they had a message for Gibson. Let the dead stay dead. Okay, as we have to keep saying, if this is true, it really adds to the conspiracy theory angle.
It sure does. It makes you wonder.
If somebody doesn't want this case to be investigated and is willing to either intimidate or outright threaten or even try to kill people, or people actually doing the investigation, or people connected or close to people that are doing the investigation.
Sounds like we got potentially some corruption with conspiracy.
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough not to say that that's what all of this appears to be. Does it mean it is 100%? No. Another theory that has come up in recent years is that Patrice Horsley was murdered by a serial killer passing through the area. Michael Shane Townson is currently serving a life sentence at the Sumter Correctional Institution near Orlando, Florida. In the summer of 2019, the news outlet WREG Memphis received a tip that a Florida inmate confessed to killing two women in Memphis in the 1990s. Townsend sent emails to WREG through the jail's messaging system. He wrote on June 7, 2019, "Been thinking a lot about an incident that happened in Mississippi. I think Rose something or other. I picked up this woman just to get high with. Investigative reporter Jessica Gertler met with Townsend to talk about the murders. He told her, I really have nothing to lose. What are they going to do? Give me another life sentence and it runs concurrent? Townsend was born in Orlando in 1969. He said he grew up with his mom and stepdad. Townsend said about his parents, they were just drug dealers. They had big parties. I was always the pass around guy. He claimed he was physically and sexually abused by his stepfather and family friends. Just got hell there. I was abused bad, burned, burned with a cigarette when I didn't do what they want. That kind of shit. I had a rough life. He tried to run away and live with his father, who was a traveling musician, but his mother forced him to return to Orlando. So does not sound like a very good, happy childhood or a good environment for any child to grow up in.
And you wonder why some people turn out the way they do.
Yeah, does it make them? I would say no. Is it a part of who they become? I would have to say yes. Would a different childhood have changed this guy's trajectory? And you have to think that it's absolutely possible.
For sure.
Townsend recalled that he used cocaine for the first time just before his 17th birthday. He quickly became addicted out of desperation to buy more drugs. He started breaking into safes at gas stations, convenience stores, and fast food restaurants. Around 1988, he met a woman to do drugs near a park in Orlando. According to Townsend, she started getting high, started fooling around, and I don't know if it was something she said or where she touched me, but I just snapped. He didn't remember what happened next, but he remembered waking up and seeing that she had been beaten to death. He recalled, I'm like, did she have a heart attack? I'm looking, then the bruise in the lip. I said, God, please don't. He claimed he doesn't remember the victim's name and was high when he met her. He left Orlando after this murder. He spent the next few years using drugs and traveling throughout the Southeast. He broke into some safes in Memphis and did drugs with women he met in various cities. Townsend said, I wanted just someone to get high with. I have $2,800. I got a bag full of coke. Let's hang out. I don't want to do all this shit by myself. Let's hang out.
Just didn't want to be alone.
It did remind me a little bit of you, in the old days on a Saturday night. I got $2,800 and a bag full of coke.
When you coming over?
During these hangouts, something, though, would happen that triggered his rage, but he wasn't sure what. He did say, no kissing. You have to be something for me to make out with you. I don't care. It's just me, not a kisser. It either had to be something she said as we were fooling around or somewhere she touched me. This is very odd to me.
Right.
Okay, you don't want to kiss. I guess I understand that. You're fooling around, and something during that fooling around process is triggering this guy to commit murder? This is the second time that he said, or maybe somewhere where she touched me, somewhere he didn't want to be touched.
Maybe it was somewhere he used to be touched when he was younger and didn't like it.
That's a great point. That is a great point. My head didn't actually go there. When asked how many people he killed, he said, probably not. He claimed he killed people in Kentucky, Florida, South Carolina, and 2 in the Memphis area. He was convicted of beating his childhood friend to death in her home in Titusville, Florida. At the time of the murder, Michael Townsend was living in the home of 29-year-old Sherry Carmen. Sherry allowed him to move in a week earlier. He had recently been released from prison after serving a term for drug, burglary, and robbery charges. He had nowhere else to go. Townsend said about the victim, she was my little sister, my little sister's best friend growing up. She was family. The girl was my damn family. I watched her grow up. I knew her mama, her brother, cousins, everybody. Sherry's boyfriend, William Stauffer, also lived with her. He last spoke to Sherry around noon on January 16, 2007. She apologized for not running any errands because she overslept. 3 hours later, Stauffer got a call from Sherry's children. They were upset because she wasn't there when they came home from school. He was at work and couldn't return until the morning. So he instructed the children to go to their neighbor's house until their grandfather could picked them up. Deputies didn't find Sherry's body when they first searched the home on January 17th, and Michael Townsend was not in the area. Deputies returned to the home in the evening and found William Stauffer outside shouting, "You have to see this. Something isn't right." The police followed him into the home. They saw a cell phone lying on the floor next to the couch. It had a red substance on it that looked like blood. In the corner of the laundry room, officers saw a pile of clothing with a bloody sheet and a pillow on top. A few feet away, they found a hammer and an unknown tool covered in blood. Underneath the pile of clothing was a body. However, due to the body's condition, an identification could not be made right away. Sherry's family identified her by a cross tattoo on her ankle. When I first read this, Gibbs, it was so strange. Deputies search the home and they don't find any of this.
Must not have been a very good search, or
none of it was there
at that time.
It's got to be one or the other.
Right.
You're missing the cell phone with blood on it. You're missing the body,
the hammer.
Now, maybe they could only, peek their head in. I really don't know what the search consisted of. Sherry's car was found the next night, about an hour away. The couple who were in the car told the Orlando police that Michael Townsend gave it to them in exchange for crack cocaine. I don't know how much crack cocaine you get for a car.
When you really want some crack cocaine, you probably don't care how much it is, as long as you're getting something.
Well, unfortunately, sometimes that's, how people think when they're battling with that type of addiction. The police arrested Michael Townsend for parole violation on January 18th. He agreed to talk to them in exchange for McDonald's.
The munchies?
I don't know. I mean, you're selling a car for crack. You're willing to talk to police, maybe possibly cop to a murder for McDonald's.
Their Coke's really good, and if their fries are nice and hot, hard to beat McDonald's.
I noticed you didn't say anything about the burgers, though.
Well, the fries and Cokes are really good.
They are. They really are.
I know you like the McRib.
I do like the McRib.
You throw the McRib in, and you would probably give up me during a investigation.
For a McRib value meal?
Yeah.
Absolutely. At the station, Townsend said that Sherry might have given him HIV, which is why he, quote, lost his mind and snapped. He admitted to hitting Sherry in the head with a fence post pipe, saying, "I just started swinging and swinging and swinging. It seemed like an hour, man."
Wow. That's a pretty tough thing to be hit by.
As we described it, she was unrecognizable. I mean, this was a really severe beating. He wrapped her head with a blanket and then blacked out. He said he came to while driving towards Orlando in Sherry's car. He saw blood on his face, so he washed it off with a water bottle. So I understand blacking out. What I don't understand is you coming to while you're driving the car. I don't know. This story seems to have maybe a hole or two in it. Now, he is admitting to murder. I don't know why he would lie about, some of the other stuff. Maybe he just has no memory. He was that high.
Maybe.
And he's calling it blacking out. He was charged with first-degree murder after making his confession. Townsend was indicted on February 6, 2007. He said from jail per Florida Today, "I didn't do it. A lot of people get off death row for something they didn't do every few months. I am definitely hopeful."
Well, they always say, "I didn't do it" later.
Well, on March 13, 2008, he pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison. Prosecutors had planned on pursuing the death penalty. So it sounded like, that is what got him to plead guilty. Most likely they took the death penalty off the table. But years later, Townsend changed his story, telling WREG that he killed Sherry because he suspected she was mistreating her children. He said Carmen was selling her effing children. You know what I mean? Literally selling her children. Pictures of her children. I don't know if she did anything physical with them. Money, Xanax, Roxy's, Lortabs. The big 2006, 2007 era, the downer pills. So this is quite a change. And it's not all that unusual. You just said it, right? People change their stories all the time. Yeah, at first he said, I was high, I snapped. I don't really know why, but I beat her with a fence post for an hour. Now he's telling a story where he's almost playing the hero.
Yeah, I did a favor to her kids.
To rescue them.
Yeah.
Because she was doing things she shouldn't have been doing for drugs and this and that.
Yeah, I'm the Robin Hood here.
This information was not mentioned in the police case file. No witnesses or relatives discussed this in their statements to police. Townsend was asked if he was remorseful for killing his friend and said, I can tell you that, yes, I did it. I can't tell you why. I don't know why. I just snapped. That day with Sherry, I was like, where does this happen? I just snapped. I hate that I did what I did. I hate living with it. Okay, well, I thought you did it because you were saving the children.
So now your story changes again.
You're back to snapping. But we talked about it, right? He confessed to murdering 2 women in Memphis, Tennessee. One of the victims might have been 27-year-old Aline Michelle Branch. On December 16th, 1993, Aline Branch left work in downtown Memphis and was near the Peabody Hotel when she allegedly encountered Michael Townson. Townsend was staying in a motel at the time. He said Aline agreed to help him find drugs. They got high together and later drove to a wooded area. She was found outside a lounge at 1:25 a.m. on December 16th. There were no noticeable injuries to her body. However, the medical examiner determined that she was strangled, which launched a homicide investigation. Townsend told WREG about the murder. My intentions were not to hurt anyone. That's not my intentions. Didn't want to kill anyone. We were fooling around. Next thing you know, I just snapped. I remember a little more. It's not like the first time when I completely blacked out. He said he might have hit Aline once or twice, then grabbed her around the neck. He took her out of the car, put her on the side of the road with her shoes nearby, and threw her bag out the car. He's really big on this snapping thing.
He is. That's his go-to response.
But it's so vague, right? I snapped. What does that mean?
Anybody could say that.
It just doesn't give clarity to anything, really. After Townsend admitted to this murder, Florida officials reached out to the Memphis police to ask if they wanted to speak to him. Detectives with the Memphis PD cold case unit traveled to Florida. According to Lieutenant Tony Mullins, Townsend gave a lot of details only the killer would know. However, the police said that he would not be extradited to stand trial for the murder of Aline Branch. And that happens, right? This guy's already serving a life sentence. He's never getting out. So the decision becomes, do we extradite him, try him again? And a lot of times they make the decision that it's not worth it. Townsend told WREG he was in Memphis for a short time. He found a second unidentified victim near Beale Street. He and the woman drove 10 minutes to find a place to do drugs. They stopped in a wooded area surrounded by trash. They were fooling around when his rage was triggered. He said, she fought me, I think that's why. We just went at it. He described the victim as an African-American woman with green eyes, which might have been contact. So, I mean, he's admitting to a number of murders, but the details in his confessions are so murky.
Yeah, pretty sketchy all the way around.
As to why he's murdering these women. You know, it's all snapping and being triggered.
Yeah, doesn't really recall a lot.
He did admit that he attacked a woman with a stick at a cemetery in Rosedale, Mississippi, soon after the Memphis murders. He wanted WREG to find out if the woman died. He described her as a pretty young African-American woman. He thought he met her near the town square, and they drove to a cemetery to do drugs. In his interview, he told WREG, we were out on the car. She pulled a gun on me, tried to take my money and my dope. He punched her and grabbed her gun, but it wasn't loaded. Instead, according to Townsend, I hit that girl with a stick. When I hit that girl a second time, I was just, what the hell? There's a truck coming, a pickup truck right there watching me. I was like, she was still alive. She was moving and moaning. She was alive. I seen this truck, like the outline of a pickup truck. It was on the other side of these trees because there was a cemetery. I was like, oh shit, I wonder if he sees me. No one got out of the truck, so he dropped his stick and backed away. Townsend said, there ain't no telling what happened afterwards. So obviously we're talking about this Townsend guy quite a bit, but it's because he admitted to this attack in Rosedale.
Right.
Which brings us back around to the murder of Patrice Horsley.
But is he telling the truth?
Well, he's not admitting to killing this woman. He's admitting to, I guess, defending himself, defending his dope,
right,
hitting her with a stick. But in his version of events, he leaves and she's still alive. And there's somebody else there.
Boy, but if you could place a serial killer at the cemetery with her, it sure helps take the heat off somebody else.
Well, and it would definitely help in a defense, right? If charges were brought against somebody else.
And if you have enough power, you maybe could try to persuade somebody even at a different prison
to cop to something that they didn't really do.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Could this be a case of, a Henry Lee Lucas where, either, yeah, he's got details, but he's getting them from articles, or he's being fed some of this stuff by investigators. I don't know, because, they're saying that he's got details that only the killer would know. When REG returned from interviewing Townsend in Florida, reporter Jessica Gertler and her photojournalist went to the Bolivar County Sheriff's Office and gave two detectives the details of Townsend's confession. They said that 22-year-old Patrice Horsley was killed in Rosedale around the same time. Patrice's brother spoke to WREG on the phone and agreed to give them the police and autopsy reports. WREG reported that the details of the reports were similar to Townsend's confession. In 2019, they reached out to county deputies to see if they had plans to speak to Townsend, but they didn't hear back. Townsend messaged WREG in the fall of 2019 and said he heard detectives from Mississippi wanted to talk to him, but he was hesitant on whether he wanted to confess because he was afraid of getting the death penalty. Yeah, you got to be careful when you're sitting there in prison with life.
Yeah, that could change.
If you confess to a murder in a state that has the death penalty. He was sentenced to life in prison after he confessed to the 1991 murder of Linda Little in Daytona Beach, Florida. So, Gibbs, as we wrap up this episode, there's a lot going on here. You have what sounds like potential corruption in a small town. You've got some unsolved homicide.
Right.
You have a person who's connected to a lot of people high up in that town or who were once high up in that town. Could he have been responsible? And could his responsibility or his role have been covered up? I think that's one possibility. And I think that's what a lot of people believe happened. But then you have this serial killer angle with Michael Townsend. And, he makes some pretty compelling statement.
He does.
Not just about an attack in Rosedale, but also a couple of murders in Memphis that police believe, he's got the details right on. Is he a serial killer who may have had a hand in some of these unsolved cases, namely Patrice Horsley's murder in Rosedale, Mississippi? I think right now, those are kind of the two most likely possibilities.
Yeah, I'm twisted with this case because I feel like with the potential of some corruption, that maybe this individual is getting away with some stuff.
You're talking about Estes.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then, when you hear this Townsend speak in his statements, you think, man, it sounds like he's really saying he was there.
Well, he either was there or he got the information from somewhere else to convince investigators that he was. Because he had to get these details from somewhere.
Yeah. So then you have to figure out what's in it for him.
Well, and I think that's a good question. What is in it for someone to confess to murders that they're not being accused of? Is it the fact that he knows he's never getting out of prison? So, he's going to get some stuff off his chest. Now, you notice he didn't confess to the murder in Mississippi.
Right.
Is that because he didn't really kill her and there really was someone there who, after all of this went down with him, actually murdered Patrice and did some other things that we talked about? Or is it because he knows Mississippi has the death penalty and he's not willing to go that far?
Yeah, that's true. Interesting case, though.
It is. I don't know how you're ever going to convict somebody when you have two people who on paper both look to be, possibly viable suspect.
And we know the DNA is no good.
Yeah. Well, and we know how that happened. I think without Townsend, everybody would look at Estes and say, something had to have happened there. And then without Estes, everybody would just say, well, obviously Townsend is a serial killer and he must have done it. Yeah. It's almost like you have two people competing for who is the more likely suspect. And I don't know if it will ever be decided or how it can be.
Yeah, how it can be.
And that's always sad. If that's the case, it's sad for the family. And then that means there's no justice for Patrice. But that's it for our episode on Patrice Horsley. We got some voicemails, Gibbs. You want to check those out?
Yeah, let's hear them.
Mike, Gibby, Captain Cat. I really do appreciate the shout out and playing the message. It means a lot. Thanks, guys. Since that episode, I have listened to all of True Crime all the time. I jumped onto Unsolved, starting from episode 1 and working my way up. I kind of like to see how you guys progress and everything. But so far, it's so good. I don't like unsolved cases, but shit, you guys give me something to listen to and laugh to and interesting stories. Probably a lot more unsolved ones out there. But again, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Keep your own time ticking.
All right, love it. Appreciate that you jumped over to Unsolved. Like we say all the time, Gibbs, not everybody can handle the unsolved ones, right. But there are a lot like these where, yes, technically they're not solved, but you got some potential suspects.
Right, you can
to wade through. Yeah.
Hey, this is Lori from Missouri. I was listening to one of your episodes, and I heard you talking about being called Peepaw or something. Anyway, I always thought it was funny that George W. had his grandchildren call him Hefe. That's a good one. Team Gibby, all the way. You're on time ticking. Bye.
Oh, that must have been what I was talking about when
I wanted to be called when you were going to be one day.
A grandfather, yeah. I don't know, Pawpaw or Papaw. I'm leaning towards something like that.
Papaw, Pippy.
Not Pee-Pee.
No, I said Pippy.
Oh, Peppy?
Pip-Pee.
Pippy?
How about
Pee-Pee? Why would I want to be called Pee-Pee?
You are a Pee-Pee.
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 Hey, the little kid goes to school and says, I love my pee-pee. I'm bringing my pee-pee to school.
I love my pee-pee. I like that.
You can't do that to a little kid.
My pee-pee's the best.
Oh my gosh. All right. With that,
I got the best pee-pee out there.
We're getting out of here. This is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
Summer might be wrapping up, but Pluto TV's Summer of Cinema is still going strong with hundreds of free movies. It's never too late to join an epic adventure with Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Step up your movie game with Stomp the Yard. Get in the ring with Nacho Libre. Or set a course for the stars with Star Trek. Every Star Trek. Download the Pluto TV app now while the sun still shines on Pluto TV's Summer of Cinema. Stream now, pay never.